It's May the 5th, 2021, and our reading today in the book of Ruth is in chapter 4. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat there. When the kinsman redeemer he had mentioned came along, Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here," and they did so. Then he said to the kinsman redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me so that I will know, for no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line. I will redeem it," he said. Then Boaz said, "On the day you buy the land from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabitess, you acquire the dead man's widow in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property." At this, the kinsman redeemer said, "Then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it." Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the kinsman redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it yourself." And he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, "Today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth, the Moabitess, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from the town records. Today you are witnesses." Then the elders and all those at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you have standing in Ephratah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Then he went to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." Then Naomi took the child, laid him in her lap, and cared for him. The women living there said, "Naomi has a son." And they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. This then is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, Boaz the father of Obed, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David. Amen. Now, as they say, the path of true love is never smooth. We certainly see that with this couple that we're looking at in the book of Ruth, though the obstacle now that is getting in the way of their coming together seems rather technical and a bit obscure and a bit legalistic. It's all to do with this unnamed near kinsman redeemer. He's already been mentioned back in chapter 3 and verse 12, and here again now in chapter 4 and verse 1. in verses 1 to 8, the legal case is put before this man and the elders, the witnesses, and the people who are gathered by Boaz himself. This is the normal way for a destitute family member to sell their property, their land, to keep it in the family, and then to have heirs to carry on the family name. But when this becomes clear to this unnamed the nearest kinsman redeemer, his role, his responsibility is to redeem, is to buy back the family out of destitution. When it becomes clear to him that this involves acquiring the dead man's widow, verse 5, and presumably Ruth as well, although that she isn't mentioned, the man has a very rapid change of heart. And he ends up saying to Boaz, "Buy it yourself." And he removed his sandal, that rather strange custom that was commonplace at this time to do with the transfer of property and so on and so on. So that's verses 1 to 8. Then verses 9 to 12, he says, you do it yourself. That's exactly what Boaz does. And he not only redeems the property and the land, he not only takes responsibility for Naomi in her widowhood. By doing all of this, he also acquires a wife. So Boaz and Ruth, finally, they are to be married. Now, it's not exactly Romeo and Juliet, is it? The arrangement here is very much like what is still the norm in most places in the world. I know in the Western world, we are used to the idea of romance and marriage because of love and so on. But if you take the big picture of the whole world, arranged marriages and contracts and arrangements like this one in RUTH Chapter 4 are still very much the norm. This is much more like the kind of arranged marriage you'd have in India or places in Africa or the Far East, China maybe. But when you think of how the Lord has led them, when you think of the obvious respect and deep affection that's growing between them, I think we can also conclude that this truly is a match made in heaven. That brings us then to verses 13 to 22. A child is added to their union. This causes great praise to be given to the Lord in verses 14 and 15. And interestingly, the honor is given to the older woman. Ruth is hardly mentioned at this point. It's Naomi who took the child, laid him in her lap, and cared for him. Naomi, who came back afflicted and empty. Now she's a picture of fullness and happiness and satisfaction. And look what they say in verse 17. The women living there said, Ruth has a son? No. Naomi has a son. Not literally. She now has a descendant. And really, that's what this story is all about. And that's why the book finishes with a list of names. That doesn't seem a very Hollywoodish way to finish a love story, does it? But this is no list of names, no ordinary list of names. This is a genealogy. And the final name in that list, the final word in the book of Ruth, is the name of David. This strikes a tremendous note of hope for the future, not just for Naomi and her family, but for the whole family of Israel. Not just even in the short term in terms of Israel. This is going to be looking forward now to a new era in the life of Israel, the monarchy unfolding now in the coming books of Samuel, the books of Samuel and the Kings, but looking forward even to a new covenant. This is the key now to the future of the world. We don't hear much about Ruth again, do we, in the Bible? But she does turn up again in the New Testament. In the first chapter of the New Testament, Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, a record of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And we read that little bit of a genealogy that's the end of Ruth is now transplanted into the beginning of Matthew. And one of the most amazing things is to be found there. It should stun us and certainly cause us to be full of wonder and love and praise that God took this Moabite pagan woman in her bereavement, in her destitution. She was brought into marriage and union, a fruitful union with a man called Boaz. Out of that, they had a child. One of their descendants was King David. And the ultimate descendant that will come through this story, the ultimate love story in the whole of the history of the world, is now focused in this descendant of Ruth, Jesus the Messiah. We read in chapter 1, verses 5 and 6, Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of King David.